He's so playful and cute. How this canine German Shepherd reacts? When I take his bed. Funny. GSD puppy. It started as a harmless joke. I thought, what would happen if I just sat on his bed for a minute? Little did I know, Max, my mischievous canine German Shepherd puppy, had a plan of his own. His reaction? Absolutely priceless. From tilting his head in confusion to pouncing around trying to claim his territory back, Max turned a simple moment into the funniest memory I've ever had. But what really melted my heart was how, despite his playful protests, this little warrior couldn't stay mad. His loyalty, his big expressive eyes, and that goofy puppy energy reminded me why canines German Shepherds aren't just Barive. They're the most loving and entertaining companions you could ever have. Before we dive into this adorable and hilarious story, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. That way, you won't miss any of our inspiring and heartwarming adventures with Max and his incredible canine spirit. Max was only 4 months old, but he already acted like the king of the house. His ears were still too big for his head, and his oversized paws made every step a clumsy adventure. Yet, despite his awkward little frame, he took his duties very seriously, especially when it came to guarding his most prized possession, his bed. This wasn't just any bed. It was a thick, plush, memory foam masterpiece shaped perfectly into a little throne right by the living room window. From there, Max could watch the squirrels in the yard bark at passing kias and keep a protective eye on his humans. He had dragged every one of his favorite toys onto that bed. His squeaky bone, the half-torn tennis ball, and even the stuffed bunny missing an ear. That day, the house was unusually quiet. I had just finished cleaning up and sat down on the couch, glancing over at Max's empty bed. With a playful grin, I thought, let's see what happens if I claim his royal throne for just a minute. I stood up and slowly lowered myself onto the bed. Instantly, I felt a little ridiculous. My legs hung over the sides, and my knees were practically up to my chest. But before I could even settle in, I heard the faint jingling of Max's collar. From around the corner, he appeared. First, just his head peeked through the doorway. One ear flopped sideways, the other standing tall. His dark brown eyes locked onto me, and his little head tilted dramatically to the side. "You've got to be kidding me," his expression seemed to say. Then, the real show began. Max trotted into the room with purpose, his little tail wagging, but his stance proud, like a tiny soldier on a mission. He stopped a few feet away, staring me down. When I didn't move, he let out the tiniest, most adorable little huff. Not quite a bark, but enough to show he was clearly offended by this injustice. I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, so this is how it's going to be, huh?" I teased. Max circled the bed like a tiny lion stalking his prey. Every few seconds he'd stop and give me that dramatic head tilt again, as if trying to understand why his beloved human had betrayed him like this. Then came the pouncing. With a playful growl that couldn't have sounded more harmless if he tried, Max launched himself onto the bed. He wriggled and squirmed, trying to push me off with his paws and nose. Every time I pretended to resist, he let out the cutest little frustrated whines, determined to reclaim his spot. But after a few failed attempts, he did something that completely melted my heart. Instead of continuing his tiny attack, he paused, sat down right in front of me, and let out the most exaggerated puppy sigh I'd ever heard. Then slowly, almost dramatically, he rested his chin on my knee and looked up at me with those big, soulful eyes. Game over. I scooped him up, laughing so hard I could barely catch my breath. Max responded by planting a series of wet, slobbery puppy kisses all over my face, his little tail wagging at full speed. In that moment, it didn't matter who owned the bed. We both knew exactly where he belonged, right in my arms. As I placed him back onto his bed, he did a few quick spins, pawed at his toys to make sure everything was still there, and flopped down with a satisfied sigh. His eyes slowly closed, his tiny body sinking into the comfort of his reclaimed throne. And just like that, peace was restored. For now. But as I watched him drift off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, what other mischief would this little canine hero get up to next? The next morning, the sun had barely started to rise when Max decided it was time for his revenge. I was still fast asleep, wrapped tightly under the covers, when I felt something cold and wet press against my cheek. "Max," I groaned, pulling the blanket over my head. But Max had his own mission, and retreat wasn't an option. With a burst of determination, he jumped onto the bed, his little paws thudding against the mattress, and began his full-scale morning assault. His cold nose found every exposed patch of skin, and his rough little tongue started a campaign of relentless kisses. All right, I'm up," I laughed, trying to shield myself from the slobbery attack. That's when I realized he wasn't just waking me up for fun. He wanted something. His eyes darted toward the bedroom door, then back at me, as if to say, "It's time. You owe me for yesterday." It didn't take long to figure it out. Max wanted his walk, and more importantly, he wanted the big park across town. Not the small patch of grass nearby, but the one with the long trails, the big open fields, his absolute favorite, the shallow creek he loved to splash in. By the time I grabbed the leash, Max was already bouncing in circles near the front door, his excitement impossible to contain. He leapt into the car like a little rocket and pressed his nose to the window all the way to the park. As soon as his paws hit the ground, he was in full explorer mode. His little nose worked overtime, sniffing every tree, rock, and blade of grass. He strutted proudly through the park, his fluffy tail held high like he owned the entire place. When we reached the creek, his favorite spot, Max didn't hesitate. He dashed straight into the shallow water, splashing wildly and barking at his own reflection. Watching him play like that, so full of life, curiosity, and pure joy, was a reminder of how simple happiness could be. But then, as Max wandered a little farther downstream, something changed. His ears perked up, and his body went still. I followed his gaze and saw it too. A small, terrified kitten trapped on a low rock in the middle of the creek. The current wasn't strong, but to the tiny kitten, it must have felt like an ocean. "Easy, Max," I said softly, grabbing his leash before he tried to dive in head first. But Max surprised me. He didn't panic or rush. Instead, he stood still, carefully observing the kitten's every movement. His instincts were kicking in, not as a playful puppy now, but as a protector. Slowly, I led Max closer along the bank, looking for a safe way across. The kitten let out a pitiful meow, its small body trembling with fear. Max whined softly, his eyes locked on the helpless little creature. I finally spotted a series of larger rocks leading closer to the kitten. With Max at my side, we carefully stepped across the creek. The water soaked into my shoes, but I didn't care. Max stayed close, his steps cautious as if he understood the importance of staying calm. When we reached the kitten, Max sat down gently on the rock beside me and stretched his nose toward the tiny creature. To my surprise, the kitten didn't shy away. It took one hesitant step forward and pressed its tiny head against Max's muzzle. In that moment, something beautiful happened. A bond formed between two unlikely friends, a big-hearted canine German Shepherd puppy and a fragile kitten who had almost given up hope. I wrapped the kitten in my jacket and carefully made our way back to dry ground. Max trotted proudly beside me, his chest puffed out like he had just completed a heroic mission. And maybe he had. Back at home, Max refused to leave the kitten's side. He guarded her like a true protector, lying close as she curled up in a soft blanket near his bed. It was as if he remembered how it felt to have his own space invaded, and now he was willing to share everything he had. That night, as the kitten slept peacefully and Max kept his watchful eyes on her, I realized something profound. Sometimes the smallest creatures teach us the biggest lessons. And Max, in his goofy, brave, and endlessly loving way, reminded me that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear oversized paws and have tails that never stop wagging. By the third day, the kitten had a name, Luna. Max had insisted on it in his own unique way. Every time I tried suggesting something else, like Daisy or Misty, Max would whine, shake his head dramatically, or simply walk away as if deeply offended by my poor naming choices. But the moment I said Luna, he wagged his tail and gave a triumphant little bark. And that was it. Decision made. Despite the rocky start, Luna was settling in surprisingly well. She quickly grew attached to Max, following him everywhere like a tiny shadow. If Max went to his water bowl, Luna was right behind him. If he settled on his bed, she curled up next to him, her tiny frame tucked safely against his fluffy side. The funny thing was, Max seemed to take this new responsibility very seriously. He no longer acted like the clumsy, playful puppy who tried to reclaim his bed through silly games. Instead, he had become a full-time big brother, constantly on alert, gently nudging Luna toward her food dish, or standing guard while she napped. One afternoon, I decided it was time to see how Luna handled the great outdoors again, this time under better circumstances. With Max leading the way and Luna tucked securely in my jacket, we headed back to the park. Max strutted confidently along the familiar trails, occasionally glancing back to make sure I was keeping up. Every time Luna peeked her tiny head out from the folds of my jacket, Max's tail wagged in encouragement, as if telling her, "Don't worry, little one. You're safe now." When we reached the quiet meadow by the creek, I gently set Luna down on the soft grass. At first, she stayed close to me, her tiny paws hesitant. But with Max nearby, she grew bolder. Max lowered his head to her level, gave her a reassuring nudge with his nose, and then, ever so slowly, began leading her across the grass. It was a sight I'd never forget. Max, still technically a puppy himself, was playing the role of a protector, guiding this tiny, fragile life with more care than I thought possible. He kept his steps slow and careful, his eyes constantly checking on her. And when a butterfly floated by, Max crouched low, encouraging Luna to play. At first, she swatted at the air clumsily, missing by a min. But then she got the hang of it, pouncing, tumbling, and chasing after the delicate wings. Max joined in too, running in slow circles around her, careful not to step too close or knock her over. For the first time, I saw Luna truly come alive, and it was all thanks to Max. But just as the moment felt picture perfect, a sudden sharp bark echoed across the meadow. Max's ears snapped up, his playful demeanor immediately replaced by alertness. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted the source of the sound, a large, unleashed dog running toward us from across the field. It wasn't playful. Its teeth were bared, and its growl was low and threatening. Max stepped in front of Luna instantly, his small body positioned between the incoming threat and his tiny new friend. His eyes locked on the approaching dog, his posture tense and unwavering. I scooped up Luna quickly, my heart racing. "Easy, Max. Stay close," I whispered, though I knew he had no intention of backing down. Despite his size, Max stood tall, his tail rigid, his ears flat against his head. As the larger dog drew closer, Max let out a deep, warning growl, one that sounded far more serious than any sound I'd ever heard come from him before. A tense moment hung in the air, and then the larger dog stopped. Maybe it was Max's unwavering courage, or the calm, firm way he stood his ground, but the dog hesitated, let out a final bark, and turned away, running back toward its owner, who was frantically calling for it. Max stood frozen for a moment longer, his protective instincts still fully engaged. When he finally turned back toward me, his tail wagged gently, and he gave Luna a soft, reassuring nudge. That night, back at home, as Max and Luna curled up together on his bed, I realized something incredible. Courage doesn't come from size or strength. It comes from the heart. And Max, though young and small, had one of the bravest hearts I'd ever known. The next morning, Max woke up before the sun as usual. But this time, there was something different in his eyes. A sense of purpose beyond his normal playful energy. He stretched his growing legs, careful not to disturb Luna, who was still fast asleep, curled tightly against his side. After a few moments of quiet observation, he gently nuzzled her awake. Luna blinked slowly, her tiny pink nose twitching as she yawned. She stretched her small body and gave Max a soft paw to the nose, a morning ritual they seemed to have invented together. Outside, the day promised clear skies and a cool breeze. Perfect weather for a little adventure. And Max had one thing on his mind: helping Luna become braver. Since the incident with the aggressive dog at the park, Luna had grown more cautious again. Though she loved curling up with Max and playing in the safety of the living room, every time the door opened to the outside world, she'd retreat behind the couch, her little heart pounding in fear. Max wasn't about to let that fear win. As soon as I clipped the leash onto Max's collar, he stood by the door, looking back at Luna with an encouraging whine. She peeked out from behind the couch, her green eyes wide and hesitant. "Come on, Luna," I coaxed gently. "Just a few steps. Max will be with you." Max barked softly and padded over to her, giving her a gentle push with his nose. It was as if he was saying, "Trust me. I've got you." With trembling paws, Luna took her first step toward the door. Then another, and when she reached Max's side, she pressed against him like a tiny soldier standing beside her captain. We walked out into the morning light together, Max leading confidently, and Luna sticking close to his side. She rode most of the way in my jacket again, but every few minutes Max would stop and nudge her, encouraging her to explore the grass with her own tiny paws. By the time we reached the quiet part of the park, something amazing happened. Luna wriggled free from the safety of my jacket and stood on her own. Max gave her space but stayed nearby, his ears perked and ready. Luna looked around, her little heart pounding so loudly I could almost hear it. But Max didn't rush her. He sat a few feet away, calmly waiting as she adjusted to the open space. Slowly, cautiously, Luna crept forward, sniffing at the grass and flicking her tail. Every time she looked back at Max, he wagged his tail gently, offering silent encouragement. And then, in a sudden burst of confidence, Luna did something none of us expected. She pounced. Not on a toy or a butterfly this time, but straight at Max's tail, batting at it playfully. Max froze for a split second, surprised by her boldness, and then let out a joyful bark. The two of them tumbled across the grass, rolling and chasing each other in a carefree dance of trust and friendship. It was the first time I'd seen Luna run freely without fear since we found her. And the joy in Max's pinsamasi, it was undeniable. For over an hour, they played beneath the soft morning sun. Max made sure never to get too rough, always letting Luna feel like she was winning their little games. He became her safe zone, her shield, and her greatest teacher. On the way home, Luna didn't hide in my jacket. She walked beside Max, her tiny paws barely making a sound on the pavement, but her confidence growing with every step. That night, as the stars stretched across the sky, Max and Luna curled up together on his big bed. But this time, something was different. Luna didn't curl up at the edge like she had in the beginning. She climbed right onto Max's back, settled between his shoulders, and purred herself to sleep. Max didn't move a muscle, He simply closed his eyes, his tail thumping once, before he, too, drifted off into peaceful sleep. And I stood there watching them, knowing that some bonds are forged through quiet bravery and unconditional love. Max didn't just protect Luna, he helped her find her courage. And in doing so, he showed me something I would never forget. Even the smallest hearts can conquer the biggest fears, as long as they have someone by their side. It had been nearly 2 weeks since Luna took her first brave steps into the park, and the transformation in her was nothing short of miraculous. She no longer hid behind furniture when the door creaked open or when the world outside called. She faced each day with newfound confidence, her tiny paws tapping across the hardwood floors with a rhythm that seemed to announce, "I'm not afraid anymore." Max, however, remained her ever-watchful guardian. Despite his young age, his instincts had matured faster than his body. His playful energy was still there, but now it was balanced by a calm, protective side. Wherever Luna went, Max followed just a few steps behind, never too close to smother her freedom, but never too far to leave her unguarded. One cool autumn afternoon, we decided to visit a new trail, one neither Max nor Luna had explored before. It wound through a quiet forest preserve just outside the city. The leaves had begun to fall, blanketing the ground in rich reds and golds. The air was crisp, and the scent of pine mixed with the earthy smell of fallen leaves. As we walked deeper into the woods, Max took the lead, his nose working overtime to investigate every new scent. Luna followed close by, her curiosity outweighing her old fears. She stopped occasionally to paw at a pile of leaves or chase a drifting feather, always looking back to make sure Max was still nearby. But just as the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with streaks of orange and pink, Max's behavior changed. His ears perked sharply and his body tensed. His eyes locked onto a thicket just ahead. I followed his gaze and immediately felt a wave of unease. From the underbrush came the low, unmistakable growl of a wild animal. Max took a defensive stance in front of Luna, his young frame vibrating with tension. He didn't bark, didn't lunge. He simply stood his ground, his eyes focused and unwavering. Then, from the shadows, a pair of glowing eyes emerged. A lone coyote, lean and ragged, stepped into the open path. It wasn't a large animal, but it was hungry, its ribs clearly visible under its patchy fur. And in the wild, a hungry coyote is unpredictable. My heart pounded. I crouched low and reached for Luna, pulling her close. "Easy, Max," I whispered, my hand tightening around his leash. But Max didn't move. His body remained perfectly still, his gaze locked on the coyote. His posture was calm but firm, sending a clear message: not today, not while I'm here. The coyote crept closer, testing the boundary. Max lowered his head slightly, letting out a low, deep growl I had never heard from him before. It was a sound that seemed to come from the depths of his young but courageous heart. A long, tense moment passed. The coyote, perhaps sensing that this battle wasn't worth the risk, took one last look at Max, then turned and melted back into the shadows of the forest. Only after the danger had passed did Max finally relax. He turned back toward me, his eyes softening, and walked calmly over to Luna, who sat trembling in my arms. Max licked her tiny head once, his tail wagging gently, as if to say, "It's all right now. You're safe." The rest of the walk home was quiet. The evening air felt colder, but Max stayed close, his body brushing against my legs with every step. Luna tucked herself into my jacket again, her tiny heart slowly settling after the fright. That night, as the fireplace crackled and warmth filled the living room, I watched the two of them curled up together on Max's bed. Luna had her head resting on Max's front leg, her breathing soft and even. Max kept his head high for a while, his eyes scanning the room, ever the protector. But eventually, even his brave heart gave in to rest, and his head settled gently over Luna's tiny back. I realized then that their bond had grown into something far deeper than I could have imagined. Max hadn't just taught Luna how to face her fears, he had proven that no matter the size of the challenge, standing strong for those you love was the greatest form of bravery. In a world full of chaos and uncertainty, that quiet, unwavering loyalty was the most powerful thing of all. The seasons changed quickly, and soon the first snowflakes began to fall. For Max, this was a brand new adventure. The moment he stepped outside and saw the white powder covering the ground, his eyes widened with wonder. Before I could even react, he took off running through the snow, kicking up flurries with every clumsy bound. His oversized paws struggled for traction, but that only made his excitement more comical. Luna, on the other hand, wasn't quite so enthusiastic. From the safety of the porch, she stared at the snow with wide, cautious eyes. Her tiny pink nose twitched as she tried to understand this cold, strange new world. Max noticed her hesitation and came bounding back, his fur dusted with snowflakes. He stood at the edge of the porch, barking playfully, his tail wagging at full speed. But no matter how much he tried to encourage her, Luna remained frozen, one tiny ole hesitantly stretched toward the snow before pulling it right back. I sat down beside her, gently stroking her soft fur. "It's okay, little one," I whispered. "Take your time." Max wasn't giving up, though. With his usual dramatic flair, he lay flat on his belly in the snow and began sliding back and forth, making the most ridiculous snow angel I'd ever seen. Every few seconds, he'd glance up at Luna as if saying, "See? It's fun! Look how brave I am." And somehow, that seemed to do the trick. With one tiny step, then another, Luna crept forward. She placed a single paw onto the snow and immediately jerked it back. But Max gave a happy bark and rolled over, exposing his belly in the snow with a goofy grin. Luna tried again, this time taking a full step onto the snowy ground. Her little paws sank slightly, and she let out the softest, most surprised meow I'd ever heard. Max trotted over proudly, brushing his shoulder against her side as if to say, "See? You're doing it." Within minutes, the two of them were playing together in the snow, like they'd been doing it their entire lives. Max would scoop up small piles with his nose, flinging them into the air, and Luna would leap after the falling flakes, swatting at them with her tiny paws. It was a perfect moment of pure, simple joy. As the day wore on and the sky turned from bright gray to dusky pink, I called them back inside. Max bounded in first, leaving a trail of wet paw prints across the floor, and immediately shook snow all over the living room. Luna followed right behind him, shivering slightly but purring louder than I'd ever heard before. I wrapped them both in warm blankets by the fire, watching as their eyes grew heavy with sleep. Max curled protectively around Luna, and she nestled her small head beneath his chin. I thought about how far they'd both come. Max, the once goofy, clumsy pup who had matured into a loyal guardian. And Luna, the fragile, terrified kitten who had found the courage to face a world much bigger and scarier than herself. But as I watched them, something dawned on me. They hadn't just changed individually, they had changed together. Their bond had given them both the strength to grow in ways neither could have done alone. And isn't that what love truly is? Not just protection or loyalty, but the willingness to stand beside someone when they're afraid, to share in their triumphs and their fears, to face the unknown together and say, "I'll be right here no matter what." The fire crackled softly, and the snow continued to fall outside, covering the world in a quiet, peaceful blanket. And in that moment, with Max and Luna sleeping soundly beside me, I realized that sometimes the smallest moments, those filled with simple acts of courage, kindness, and companionship, are the ones that leave the deepest mark on our hearts. They had found each other in their darkest moments, and together they had found a reason to hope, to trust, and to love again. Winter melted into spring, and with it came a new chapter in the lives of Max and Luna. The bond they had forged during those long, cold months had only grown stronger. Their days were now filled with warm sunlight, green fields, and endless adventures that stretched far beyond the safety of the backyard. By now, Max had grown into his massive paws. His body had filled out, strong and majestic like a true canine guardian, but his playful, loving heart remained unchanged. Luna had transformed as well. The once fragile kitten had become a graceful young cat, her confidence blooming like the spring flowers that now filled the garden. But it wasn't just their friendship that had evolved. Something deeper, almost unspoken, had settled between them, a trust so complete it felt unbreakable. One sunny afternoon, I decided to take them both on their longest adventure yet, a trip to the open countryside beyond the city limits. It was a vast stretch of rolling hills and wildflower meadows, a place untouched by noise or crowds. It felt like freedom, pure and limitless. As soon as we arrived, Max took off across the fields, his powerful legs carrying him effortlessly through the tall grass. Luna, no longer the timid kitten, bounded right after him. The sight was breathtaking. Two souls running side by side under the wide open sky, perfectly in sync. For hours, they explored together. Max led Luna to secret spots he discovered, like a cool stream hidden between two hills and a patch of wild mint that sent delightful scents into the air. Luna climbed low branches and perched like a queen, while Max lay beneath her, his eyes always watching to make sure she was safe. And then, just as the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with brilliant strokes of gold and pink, it happened. A distressed cry echoed from the far side of the meadow. It was faint, but unmistakable, a desperate call for help. Max's ears shot up, and without hesitation, he bolted toward the sound. I sprinted after them, my heart pounding. As we crested a hill, I saw the source of the cry. A young boy, no more than 6 or 7 years old, had fallen into a shallow ravine. His ankle was trapped under a fallen log, and he was crying out in pain. Without waiting for instruction, Max leaped down the slope. He reached the boy and immediately licked his face, calming his sobs. Max then began pawing at the log, trying to lift it, his powerful legs digging into the ground. I climbed down carefully and joined Max. Together we managed to free the boy's ankle, and Max stood protectively by his did, letting the boy rest his weight against his sturdy frame as I checked for injuries. Luna, ever the quiet guardian, sat on the ridge above, watching with wide, concerned eyes. The boy's parents arrived shortly after, tears streaming down their faces as they thanked us over and over. They had been searching frantically for their son, and it was Max who had found him first. That night, back at home, something had shifted in Max. He lay quietly by the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames, his expression thoughtful. Luna curled up beside him as always, but this time she rested her head over his front leg, purring louder than ever before. I knelt beside them, gently running my fingers through Max's thick fur. "You're more than a protector now, aren't you?" I whispered. "You're a hero." Max didn't respond, of course. He didn't need to. His actions had spoken louder than words ever could. As the house grew quiet and the stars filled the night sky, I realized that this wasn't just the story of a puppy and a kitten who found each other. It was the story of courage found in unlikely places, of love that asked for nothing but gave everything in return. Max had taught Luna how to be brave, and in return, she had given him purpose. Together, they reminded me that true strength isn't found in size or power. It's found in the willingness to stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. And sometimes, the greatest heroes walk on 4 legs and leave paw prints, not just in the snow, but on our hearts forever. If this story touched your heart, remember, courage and loyalty can overcome any challenge. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share it with someone who loves heartfelt stories like this one. Together, let's spread messages of hope, love, and bravery.